Hello, I'm Barry Silverberg, Director of the Center for Nonprofit Studies at Austin Community College, and this is Civil Society, a periodic podcast to provoke more thinking about issues affecting nonprofit effectiveness and success. My guest today is Raul Alvarez, currently the Executive Director of the Community Advancement Network, more commonly known as CAN. Among his contributions to our community, Raul has served on the City Council, Austin City Council, from 2000 to 2006, and on the Board of Trustees of Austin Community College. I've had the pleasure of working with Raul on numerous projects over the years, and have really come to appreciate his passion and commitment to public service. So, good morning, Raul.
Good morning.
So, what is it that makes you so passionate and keeps you engaged in public service?
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's been a pleasure to be involved with the Nonprofit Center, and the advisory board, and now I have the distinct honor of kind of being the executive director for CAN after being involved with the city and AISD and ACC and Cap Metro, and all those are entities I've been involved with, and now they're all on my board, so I get to continue working with them. And
you can't get away from them, can you?
That's right. And so it's used to be on the CAN board as a city council member. So it's been.
And you chaired the council at one point.
Yep, sure was. The chair, don't ask me to tell you what year, but it was 04 roughly, right around there. But CAN has evolved. We're 25 years into this. I'll call it a project, because it's a partnership of 25 kind of government and nonprofit entities that kind of come together for the specific purpose of trying to align efforts and leverage resources so we can have a better impact, a more effective impact on our community well-being. So I think it's ACC, of course, is one of our partners, and we have government partners, city and the county, and city of Pflugerville is another municipality in there. We have school districts, higher ed institutions besides ACC, and chambers of commerce and other community partners like St. David's and Seton and United Way. So it's exciting to have all those folks at the table wanting to see how we can better meet the needs of our families.
So why are you involved in this line of work?
Well, I think from when my time when I was in college, really, started volunteering at that point. I can't say I did much volunteering in high school. I was, it wasn't something that was the norm, I guess, in my small town in the Valley in South Texas. But I started tutoring kids and volunteering at a senior center in East Palo Alto, which is kind of akin to East Austin, and for some reason, just doing that work helped me to understand sort of where I fit in the world, and made me understand why I was at Stanford. That's where I went as an undergrad, and helped me.
I'm impressed.
Understand how to, again, how I could make my time at Stanford meaningful in a way that was more than just focused on myself, but hopefully on the community as a whole.
So you outline kind of what CAN does. Your mission is to improve social health, educational and economic opportunities through partnerships and collaboration. The motto is inform, engage, and activate. So give me some examples of what CAN is doing and may have done in the last couple of years.
Sure. I think, in terms of those sort of key action phrases that you mentioned, inform, engage, and activate, there's a lot of overlap in there, but part of it in terms of CAN is how do we promote and support collaboration to address community well-being. So as partners, how do we do that? But there's also an interest in developing tools and resources to support other efforts that maybe they're not led by CAN, but that are aimed at improving community well-being. So I would kind of categorize the things that we do in terms of developing tools and resources, that can be available to not just CAN partners, but the community as a whole. Like our CAN dashboard is one of those tools. We also have a cultural competence, diversity, and inclusion toolkit, a language access toolkit that we kind of make available to the community. And then we also engage in a way, hopefully that activates our community potential for change. And that's how the activate part is, with all this potential we have, having 25 partners at the table, there's great potential to have an impact, but how do you do that? You have to activate that potential in some way, and so by developing these tools and by engaging in certain ways, we can help make realize that potential that we have for having an impact. And I think that's currently right now, some of the things we're working on specifically as CAN is we have a language access action team that's kind of looking at strategies for better serving the needs of different language communities. So very robust kind of a community collaboration. And then we're also have some deliberative dialogues that kind of are in the same vein as a civil society. It's kind of how do we create a civil society where we can come together and talk about difficult issues in a civil manner and achieve a better level of respect and understanding of other viewpoints. Not necessarily have an answer to a sticky issue. And the issue we selected for this year is addressing the opioids crisis. And so in the fall, we'll be having some dialogues around that topic.
So one of the major things you do is help foster informed community dialogues. If I'm
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned the dashboard, which is an extremely valuable tool outlining, I forget how many characteristics. 17 characteristics of the community. So of that, which ones do you think are, well, let me not ask you, choose among your children. Okay. What would be one of those that would be a surprise to people about our community?
Yeah, I think a couple of things I would add. There is like a demographic section where we try to kind of lay out sort of what is happening in terms of population. And so one of the things that we look at there is that, or the questions I think that we ask is can we afford to ignore diversity? Once you look at our population statistics, I think the interesting thing is in our report this year, it's the first time there is no race or ethnic group that's 50% of the population. So whites are 49% of the population, which means blacks, Hispanics, Asians, Native Americans, and others are about half of the population. So that's kind of an interesting thing to note. But if you look at the youth demographics, you find that about 65% of our population is youth of color. And so again, if part of the reason we break the data down in that way is so you can look at, project into the future about what our community is going to look like, and then what should we be doing now to address the needs of those particular communities.
Right. Aside from demographics,
Mm-hmm.
where do we stand in terms
Sure.
of poverty in this community?
Well, poverty is one of those issues that if you look at sort of the main CAN indicators, we have the community-wide indicators. So you have some of the economic indicators that show Austin is doing very well, which is what you'll find, especially compared to the rest of the country, we're doing very well. And poverty is one of those where in the 5-year period, we've probably gone from about 16% poverty to 13% poverty in that 5-year period that we report on. And one of the things I heard when I go in the community is, well, that's not the reality for everybody in Austin. Right. So if you look at certain ethnic communities and if you look at certain neighborhoods, the poverty is much higher. And so we, in our report, we do break down poverty by race and ethnicity, and we find that poverty for African Americans and Hispanics is about 4 times higher than it is for whites. Same thing with unemployment. That would be another one where if you look at just the main indicator on the CAN dashboard, you'll find Austin's doing great. We went from 5.5 unemployment 5 years ago to 3.1% unemployment the most recent year. But if you look at it by race, you find that the unemployment rate is double for African Americans. And so that's one of the things we added a couple years ago is an equity analysis so that you can dig deeper into the data and better understand what's happening and have a more true picture of what's happening in Austin.
So the data that you have there, is it static or is it dynamic? Can I go in there and push a few things and get the data, get what I want, or am I just getting a report?
Well, to the extent that we do update the data every year, so that's one facet that I think, I don't know if it's unique, but that it's useful because and we report on 5 years worth of data, so you look at a trend and not a 1 point in time kind of in isolation. But you can download the spreadsheets for the different charts that we have on the dashboard, but you'd have to then play with it. Yeah, play with the data, but. I think one thing that we've done is just, this year we did update our website, so it's a lot easier to navigate the website. I mean, the indicators online, and there's probably 4 or 5 times as much data on the website than there is in the report itself, so you actually can glean more just by looking at that information.
So, and this is a hard question maybe to ask, but, or to answer, it's easy to ask, is, so looking at the trends, if we look at the future of Austin and Travis County, clearly diversity. The percentages are going to shift, so we basically have to learn how to live with each other and respect each other and talk to each other. What other kinds of things are happening? What other, if I only had 1 minute to look at the dashboard, what would I extract? What would you like the viewers to extract?
I think one of the things that stands out that maybe doesn't receive as much attention as it should is sort of the obesity rate in our community. Because if you look at the 5-year period we report on, it went from about 19%, and this is adult obesity,
right,
from 19% to about 24% in that 5-year period. So we're actually, so the trend is not a good trend, and which means we're not on par to meet the goal that's articulated right in the report also. But that's a pretty drastic increase. And just because health affects so many things, children's ability to learn, adults' ability to work, I think that has implications beyond just kind of health, and of course it affects mortality right down the road, and it affects other health conditions that relate to obesity. So that's one that I think that's worth mentioning. The other one I would mention is kind of early childhood education, especially since I mentioned that 65% of our youth population is children of color, and most of those children are going to be kind of low-income children. But if you look at their kindergarten readiness statistics, you compare low-income and non-low-income, there's about almost a 40-point spread.
Wow.
In terms of kindergarten readiness. So it's like 63 to 28, something like that. And so again, I think these are things that even though we had made some progress on kindergarten readiness, we're seeing kind of it starting moving where there's less kids kindergarten ready, and we're also seeing that disparity by income, and that again, these are things that if we want to stay out ahead of the issue, that we might want to focus on now and not wait till it starts affecting graduation rates and college admission rates and that sort of thing.
So I'm an average citizen. I just found out about your organization. I'm impressed. I want to get involved. What do I do?
Well, I mean, I think definitely kind of look at our website to see kind of what we're currently working on, and we have a research tab, so it talks about the research that we published ourselves, and we even
it's a well done website, by the way.
And we have well, thank you. And we have resources from other from other state and federal sources, of information related to the dashboard indicators. So if you want to dive deeper into those, you can as well. But then we also have a initiatives sort of section, and you can look at our language access work. We do have a work group, or action team, I should say, that's looking at our report that we did on language access, and now trying to look at how do we implement the report. So instead of just emailing it out saying here's a report, it's like how do we actually try to actualize or realize some of those recommendations. And we have our deliberative dialogues that we've done this will be our 3rd year doing that, and we had initially we had dialogues around bridging the economic divide. Last year was around safety and justice issues, kind of police community relations, and this year it'll be around the opioids crisis.
So I can get involved by being on one of these groups?
Yep, get involved.
My 2 cents?
In an actual work group. We have a community council too that folks could apply to serve on. And they have the last couple of years really focused on child poverty, just partly for the reason. So some of the reasons we've talked about, and but otherwise, I mean, I think it's what we try to do is kind of serve as a resource for the community. And actually, the dashboard itself has a local effort section. So if a certain issue interests you, we try to also articulate who's working on that issue.
That's cool.
If you want to get plugged in, because Ken and our 4 staff folks can only do so much on community-wide issues. But if we can connect you with the folks who are working on the issue of interest to you, then that's another way that we
That's
try
cool.
to help. Yeah.
That's great. So, in sort of coming to a close, what do you think are maybe one or two things, based upon your experience, which has been quite broad? I've been in a lot of the major arenas in the city and the county, that viewers might do to help strengthen our community's general well-being?
Well, I think it's just important to be involved in whichever way you can. I mean, I think just civic involvement and civic engagement is something that we should focus on. You know, voting is one of the dashboard indicators where you don't see as much improvement, you know, that you would like. But I think that that's an arena where I think we need to place more of an emphasis. You know, kind of getting more
Civic participation
in a variety of ways, and that's an arena where I think we don't have, other than voting, a good measure of how do we measure if we are a civil society. You know, are we engaged in those activities that would characterize us as a civil society? And that's partly why we introduce this deliberative dialogues, so that we can give people an opportunity not just to be in the conversation, but to be trained to facilitate conversations, which a lot of times are difficult conversations. But you know, it's kind of nice to have someone who's going to be neutral and able to be there. And who else in the community is doing those kind of capacity building work, so that we can, again, just become an entity that, or a community that's focused on democracy. I think for me, the bottom line is democracy requires participation.
That's right.
And it's not just going to your corners and saying, this is my view and that's your view and let's see who wins. It's more, you know, how do we understand each other and actually use that mutual understanding to hopefully get further along than we would otherwise.
Yep. So the tools are on the website, are available to anybody who wants to.
Yep, absolutely.
Excellent.
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you, Raul.
Thank you.
This has been fascinating, and I think that what CAN is doing is obviously critical. And the longer it's around, the better and better job it's doing. Certainly part of that is due to you as well.
We'll keep plugging away, so thank you.
I'd urge our viewers to visit our website, nonprofitaustin.org/civil society, to read more about the Community Advancement Network. We have access to their website, the issues that we discussed today. Also, please share your comments on today's broadcast on our website. This is Barry Silverberg with Civil Society, a Center for Nonprofit Studies podcast, in collaboration with the wonderful folks at ACC TV. Thank you for joining us today.